thing here. All right, welcome to my humble abode. Well, since there have been lots of questions in regards to different kinds of media study approaches, I figured, hey, we're all stuck at home, we're all online. Why not use this time to then try again to sum up in my own words, well, in different words, compared to when we're in class, to what are those different media theories, what do they mean, and how can we understand them? I try to keep it short and simple, so I hope it works. So, and the first thing that we're going to talk about is the ideas of Jean Baudrillard, because Baudrillard just follows us around basically everywhere. When you do media studies, right? When you're in the media studies field and you try to analyze text and try to understand things, and then you come across postmodernism and whatnot, Jean Baudrillard will be there. May he rest in peace. But his thoughts and his ideas are with us, and I do think for a reason. Again, as with every theory, you don't have to completely agree with it. You don't have to completely disagree with it. You have to come to a conclusion by yourself, using, well, what you learn, but also, of course, how you understand his discussions. Now, most academics don't want you to blindly just agree. Well, many want you to blindly agree, but the real ones don't want you to blindly agree. They want to be challenged and they want to be discussed, and that's what we do with all the media theories here. So, without further ado, let's discuss Jean Baudrillard's ideas. So, one of the main ideas that are being discussed in, I think, almost every intro to a media studies class, I believe, is semiotics and the symbolic exchange, right? Symbolics versus semiotics. The symbolic exchange versus the semiotic exchange. So symbolic means you take everything very literal, right? You see symbols, and those symbols, they mean just what you think they mean. You don't have to add anything to it. The semiotic exchange then just means everything has a meaning. Everything is processed, right? So according to Baudrillard, he said, the symbolic exchange, you see what's happening, and therefore you know what is true, what is real, is the true form of communication. He said that's the good way to communicating, that's the sacred way of communicating. It's organic, it's raw, it's rather primitive because it's not being artificially enhanced or anything. It's collective, therefore it's real. On the other hand, the semiotic exchange is then where things happen, right? I add meaning to Baudrillard's studies, for example. I add my ideas, and I'm going to tell them to you right now. So that's kind of semiotic exchange, right? So semiotic means, according to Baudrillard, it's bad, it's profane, it's processed, so it's not raw, right? You don't get it from the source. It goes through something else, and this something else, this someone else, adds something to it. That's why it's very contemporary, it's individual, because individuals add something to it, they work with it, and therefore it is simulated. So it's, and that will lead us to the next concept, therefore it's not real. Yeah. Real is just the raw information, the symbolic exchange. When you see it raw without any processing, so to speak. Once someone, some entity, person, news organization, whatever processes the raw information, so to speak, the raw symbol, it becomes a semiotic exchange, and then it's not real anymore, according to Baudrillard. Why? Because no one is unbiased, right? We add things, or we understand things the way we want them to understand, and going to tell the audience what they should think, believe, and so on. And so that's why he says the symbolic exchange is the real, true, good form of communication, even though it's the easy one. And the semiotic exchange is the bad form of communication. However, these days, we basically only have semiotic exchanges. So, now that we discussed the semiotic and the symbolic exchange, and we realized that Baudrillard calls the semiotic exchange simulated, not real, this leads us to the next concept that has been discussed in postmodernism and media studies and so on, hyperreality. right? Based on this idea, meaning what we see on TV, on Instagram, what we hear on Clubhouse, for example, might not be real. Shock, horror, I know. What you see on reality TV is not real. I wish I was better with special effects. So, now that's not a new revelation, we know that. But the thing that he now explains is, even though we know that what we see on IG might not be real. By the way, my cat content is 100% real, just saying. But even though we say, or we know that what we see by posted by influencers, the Kardashians, Vatanika, whoever you follow here, right? DJ, what's his name, Matum? Whoever you follow, we know it's not real, it's fake. It's not their everyday life, right? But for us, it kind of, we still buy into it, and hence it becomes real. So this simulation becomes reality. So it's not real, but for us it's real. That's hyperreality. It's like if I just post cool stuff all the time of my travels around the world, for example. Even though I'm stuck here, but I only post like cool travel pictures. Like, oh my God, he must have such an awesome life. Oh, it's so cool. I want to be a professor at Tamasa too. They must have really cool lives. And yeah, so this then would be hyper-reality. This hyper-reality now, that happens everywhere. Yeah. Different TV shows, reality TV shows, Instagram influencers, Clubhouse room holders, runners, I don't know how to call those people, Clubhousers. Do those rooms on Clubhouse have bouncers? Anyways, so all those things are hyperreality because no one is just giving you the raw symbolic communication. It's all semiotic exchange, and hence simulated reality, hyperreality. Okay, now this hyperreality then leads to something that he then later on called hypersimilitude or hypertruth. Hypertruth might be easier. Yeah? So this hypertruth, hypersimilitude is basically what then happens afterwards. If hyperreality equals now reality for us, it becomes reality, then this leads to what we see, this hyperreality thing, becoming the actual truth to us. So what I see on CNN, what they tell me about the coronavirus, for example, becomes truth to me. And that's then, even though it's not maybe 100% factual, it's not based on raw information, it's based on the spin of CNN, for example. If they are sponsored by Moderna, what we don't know, like one of the companies that creates COVID vaccines, for example, they might add a certain spin to it. Who knows? Right? So, but this becomes then truth to me, and everything from then on I will base on my perception of this hyper-reality media text. Hence, it is hyper-truth to me. Whew. Interesting, right? I'm hesitating because I'm just thinking right now, man, I wish Baudrillard would be still alive. He would have had fun with like analyzing the current media landscape. But now that he's not, we can use those concepts and maybe take them a step further and maybe analyze current media landscapes. And of course, that's what we will do. So now the most famous and most criticized aspect of Baudrillard's research was the simulacrum. That's usually also the one that is like the most discussed, but also the hardest to grasp, even though it's actually not that difficult. It's just a weird word, I believe, and that's why we struggle with it. But actually, the simulacrum is basically the transition, the transformation from symbolic into the semiotic exchange. So he called it, and I have it on my notes so I don't mess it up, a journey from reflecting reality to masking reality, to having no relation to reality whatsoever. So you go from having the symbolic exchange to then reflecting reality, having something to do with it, just adding a few pointers maybe. Then you mask reality, you add more layers to it, according to maybe your personal opinions and so on. And then in the end, maybe it doesn't even reflect reality at all anymore. As an example, The Bachelor reality TV show. That's the example that everybody, every lecturer, every teacher, every professor always uses. So I'm going to do it too. So The Bachelor, right? Reality TV show, apparently with like one single guy and then lots of single ladies who are trying to, fight for him. And in the end, they're going to end up together if he picks one of those ladies, and then they end up happily ever after. Never works. So this should be reflect reality, two single people, right? But then you put them in like different settings and like different circumstances and try to influence the way they behave, for example, with challenges and whatnot. Then you stir the drama, right? The producers stir the drama, then they say, hey, he actually, while he told contestant A that he really likes her, the same night he made out with contestant B. They're stirring the drama, so then they're masking more of the reality. Until this show does not reflect reality at all anymore. They're in a big mansion. It's all like overly dramatized. It's like not relatable at all. But still, we take it as reality for whatever reason. Yeah, so this is what he's talking about. And then this transformation from it could be something real into changing it, adding more layers, masking reality because it's clearly not real anymore, to reflecting something that is clearly scripted and made up, but still perceived by the audience as, it's a reality TV show, so I wonder who he picks in the end. Yeah, so this is this whole transformative process. This is the simulacrum. Easy, right? One of my favorite quotes by Baudrillard is actually, and again, let me read it so I don't mess it up. So we live sheltered by science in the deserts of the real. I liked it very much. So he says, we live in a desert of the real, meaning we're not living in reality. We're sheltered by science. Why? Because the science that we choose to interpret and to follow and to believe are obviously the science that we agree with. Right? So we are sheltered from reality because we only consume media that kind of reflects the points that we agree with anyways. I think that's a very powerful quote, by the way, and it very much also explains how people consume media, why people consume media. So what we call reality basically is just a simulacrum. Right, so we live in the simulacrum. When we watch the news, right, you see the world, how it's interpreted by the news channel, by the news anchor, whoever you're watching, whoever you're following, whoever you listen to on Clubhouse. This person tells you, or those people in the room, they share their opinions, and we just believe them. Yeah? Or maybe we don't believe them, but it's based on the science that we believe in. All right, so we live in the desert of the real, and that's one of the key messages of Baudrillard's studies. What also goes along with what we discussed before, the hyper-truth, right? Baudrillard says this whole hyper-reality thing, it leads to the destruction of the real or the devastation of the real. So what he means by this is, he says, because we believe the hyperreality, and we see, for example, he used the Grand Canyon as an example. He said we see the pictures of the Grand Canyon. Yeah, we see Google Earth Grand Canyon, for example. So then, if you go to the real Grand Canyon, it's not that wow anymore because you've seen it before, right? So this hyperreality thing that is happening, so the things are being shown over and over again, how awesome they are. You see the Grand Canyon in movies, for example, and of course in movies, it's not real. It's like made look even more impressive than it actually is, right? So that if you would see the real one, you'd be like, It's like, and I have to admit it happened to me. Back before COVID hit, I was traveling to Paris for the first time in my life, even though I'm from Europe, never been to France, probably because I'm German and, France, Germany. So I went to visit a friend in Paris. So I actually went to the Eiffel Tower for the first time in my life. And I went to the Eiffel Tower and I thought, that's not that cool. It looks nicer on the pictures. And that's exactly what he's talking about, right? So the devastation of the real, it's like, thanks to hyperreality, thanks Obama, no, thanks Hyperreality, the reality isn't that great anymore. And we rather see Hyperreality, we rather believe the hyper truth because it's cooler. It looks better on pictures. I had to add lots of filters to my picture of the Eiffel Tower to make it look cool. Another thing that Baudrillard explained and that I think is like very interesting, especially these days, is he says, television encourages indifference, distance, and apathy. It anesthetizes the imagination. And I think that's even worse, German accent, sorry. It's even worse with the internet. What he means by this, he's like, we know McLuhan. McLuhan said, it's a global village, right? Medium is a message, but in this case, the global village. So we all communicate with each other, even though we are far apart. It feels like a village because we can know everything that's going on thanks to electronic media, back then TV, but now internet even more so, of course. Now, Baudrillard says, Marshall, wait a second. I think it leads to apathy. Why? So one example is if something bad happens and you're in the West, something bad happens in China, for example, COVID-19, we don't really care about it until it really hits home. Even though we can see the news, we can read how many people have it and how devastating it is. We're like, okay, it's over there in China, it's in Asia, whatever. We don't really care, right? Until it really hits home. In this case, the US. Here in Thailand, we cared way before, way sooner, of course. But also the other way around. If something like this would happen in the US first, here in Asia, we would be like, okay, it's over there. Let's just wait. It's never going to come here. It's too hot here. It's not going to come over here, right? So still very interesting, right? Even though we see everything that's happening, we can communicate. This is still a thing, like the distance is still a thing. Also, what he meant by this is you see it over and over and over and over again. This leads to what he called the delirious event of the non-spectacle, meaning and he used the Gulf War as an example. If you see war on TV, on the internet, over and over and over again, like every time the news show you like bombers flying, people being shot at, and so on, at some point, you're getting numb to it. You're like, okay, I've seen it for the past 6 months, every day. Okay, whatever, like zap or like just click away or whatever, right? So that's what he means by this as well. So this whole thing of us being exposed to media over and over and over again and all the time eventually leads to the delirious spectacle of the non-event. That's how he called it. The delirious spectacle of the non-event, meaning for us, then maybe the war is nothing more than just another movie or a computer game. Yeah, it's like, did it really happen? If you don't care, did it happen if you don't care? I mean, of course it happened, right? But it happened for us. I know it's a weird question to ask, right? But if I don't really pay attention and I just see it like as a side note, like, yeah, whatever, war, I've seen it before, not impressive. So yeah, that's then how media, also the semiotic exchange, ruins the symbolic exchange. So if you would only see the pictures, you would be devastated, like, oh my God. But then, yeah, if you on Fox, for example, they showed the bombing. Then back then during the Gulf War, they showed the bombing and played like, I know, American anthem or whatever, like music that uplifts you or whatnot. Yeah, that's just crazy, and this just changes the whole perception. And that's what he meant by the delirious spectacle of the non-event. So he then said, yeah, so the feelings that you have when watching the news are no different to the feelings you have when you watch a soap opera. And that's the problem, right? So if you watch a soap opera or a romantic movie or whatever, you have just kind of the certain feelings because that's what the movie tries to do with you. But that's exactly what the news are doing now too. And that's where he goes or comes from when he says like the delirious spectacle of the non-event. So now that's like Jean Baudrillard in 20 minutes. Of course, that doesn't do him any justice, and we should talk about him for days. But of course, now my main question would be, what do you think about those ideas of Baudrillard? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you see this still happening? Because, I mean, the theories he came up with, right, when I talked about television and the beginning of the internet, he died in 2007, I believe. So he wasn't really around for the whole explosion of social media, for example. What do you think Baudrillard would say about TikTok and Clubhouse these days? And I'm only halfway joking. So let me know what you think. Shout out in whatever form possible. And stay tuned for the next episode with, again, 20 minutes of who do you want to see next? Marshall McLuhan? Dominic Strinati? Let me know. See you soon.